Bam.
This is Tim Fitzgerald, and you're watching the Break It Down show. Live it, love it.
I love it, man. This is great. There's not many guests that we can have on that know us pre-Break It Down show because that shit's been going on for a long time. But we go all the way back to the midweek MASH OzCat days. Shout out to the folks in Vallejo at OzCat. And so, one, it's great to see you in chat. Have you been on the show before? I think you have, right? A long time ago.
Let's see. Let's see. The last time was right when I got the Cal Maritime job, and then we did a Fitz Blitz, like one of my last Fitz Blitzes. So that was the last time we had done a show together, 2021.
Wow, that's crazy. And then you went to work for St. Mary's, and now you've got a new gig. You're going to be the play-by-play for the Stocton Ports.
Yeah. It's funny. This is a job I talked about back when you and I met doing the Admirals was, that Stockton job. I think that's when I would like to target, get into A-ball, get into affiliated ball, still work the NorCal market. And 10 years later, it happened.
Do you think, is that the normal path? Is that just the path you had to take? Because like someone like, there's so many guys who just, look, without being an athlete who can say, hey, I know the game, I can do color. But play-by-play, it's crowded, man. It's crowded.
It is, and it's a whole path. It's a whole pattern. I actually went off that path a little bit to the SID world, the sports information director world, communications directors, that sort of thing. Because when I was with the Admirals, that was a combo director of broadcasting and media relations. So I was a media relations guy. I was also the broadcaster. Eventually at home, in the last couple of years, at home, I was the PA guy, so I could kind of run the whole show of things going on. Now about this guy, Sylvan Pugh, and okay, now fix this, then put this over here. It was easier for me to do home media director things that way. And I was just play-by-play on the road at the end, and that formula worked. Then I went to the sports information director route because, sometimes you like year-round employment with benefits while still working in sports. But that's a pretty demanding world time-wise, especially at the small schools. I was at the NAIA level in Vallejo, Cal Maritime. Then I bumped up to D1. I took a 2-level jump up to D1 with St. Mary's, but it was still a mid-major. It was still a tiny conference. We were the tiniest staff in that tiny conference. So, I'm covering 5-7 sports by myself. If I have a graduate assistant, it's 5. They're able to take 2 off my hand. But it's a lot. I'm a dad these days, and that's more. So I had planned in mind, okay, the year or 2, I'm going to go back to strictly broadcasting. I'll be done with this SID and media relations life. I thought about climbing up to higher D1s because recently, when I talk to that Pac-12, when I talk to people there or even the SEC, like St. Mary's baseball, we played Florida a couple weeks ago. Actually won a game against number 4 Florida. And right. So I'm connecting with their SID. Hey, here's our stats. Here's our files. Here's the roster. Let me know any questions. And I'm looking at how many sports he has. He has 1 sport, Pete. He has baseball, and he is the 3rd contact for football. It's like that even at Cal, Stanford. My guy Brian, who hired me at Cal Maritime or at St. Mary's, now he's at Stanford. He's got Stanford football, women's golf. That's it. So as you climb up into those levels, the job's not so bad, but it's pretty demanding otherwise. And he's getting to do some broadcasting over there, but I wanted to really focus on going back into broadcasting. The reason I started doing all this, and now I'm able to have that be, the bulk of what I'm doing.
Yeah. There's
a lot of guys take this to answer your question though. A lot of guys, they make that climb, A, high A, double A, triple A. Like I replaced Alex Jensen, who went up to AA Springfield Cardinals. The irony, the Cardinals free up this job for me. And so, or maybe that's coincidence. I don't know if that's irony. I'll have to ask Alanis Morissette that one. But it's like, that you make those climbs, you do it like that. I sort of moved around. I'm working a market. I'm working NorCal, I'd say, more than anything.
Right. Can someone work in the minor leagues professionally and have a real living? Between that and appearance money, everything else. And then if so, is that at single A level? Is it high A? Is it, it's certainly not complex ball, right? You got to get to the point. Right.
I feel like the demarcation line is AA. It is for the players. Like that's where, you've made AA. You're really on the radar now. you make double A as a broadcaster, and sometimes that depends on what market you're in. Like if you're in double A in the outskirts of Chicago, yeah, it's a little, your money is maybe a little different than say if you are in Springfield, Missouri, or the Carolina League or something like that. So you get by, like you get enough to get by, and I'll piece together with contract broadcasting once baseball ends, doing some St. Mary stuff still. And so you get by, but you're maybe living with family or something like that. Luckily, my significant other makes twice as much as I do. So she, I can, the trade-off is I'm going to be able to be around for the kid in the daytime while working baseball at night. So that's saving us a ton on daycare. So you make these fiscal exchanges in there. Yeah. But hey, it's better than where it was compared to when you met me. I was, had to move back in with my mom, like in my 30s.
Like all of us, you were hustling. Yeah, you were hustling.
Yeah.
And you were doing the Raiders show and all of these different things just to really, in our world, you have to outwork your problems. And one of the biggest problems is existing. You can be wonderfully talented. So when I went through my undergrad at Cal State Hayward, I wanted to do what you were doing, or be Gary Radnich or something like that, and do like the sports at 11. Totally. So I would go to the A's games, and I had like a Walkman that could record, and I would put the headphones around my mouth because they've turned into a microphone, and I would call the game all the time. I did that all the time, and I would listen to myself. And Joe Davis, we had him on the show. You've talked to Joe. He's like, I listened to myself, and it was like, slow down. And all those other things. And I was going through that process, but man, I couldn't crack the code on getting that first gig. And I didn't, there was no one to mentor me that I could find, and there were no jobs. And so I got away from it, but
you're a bit in that
system. Yeah. And so if you get into single A, double A, I mean, there's less and less jobs, right? And they're more and more valuable, and there's less and less folks leaving those jobs.
Yeah, people hang up, think about at the big league level, how these old dudes hang on to them. They're in those jobs for a while. They got to pass away or say something racist or get a DUI or something like that, is what leads to these rare openings in this industry. And, a lot of guys and women too now, I'm glad to see that there's more women doing this. There are, you're sort of, you go to Arizona State, you go to Syracuse, Mizzou, even you go to Missouri, and you're plugged in that way. You make some sort of an internship somewhere, and you begin your climb. You get that first in, and then you network, and then you've worked your way up. You got to have the talent. You got to be able to pass somebody's going to play your demo. You hope you keep their attention for 30 seconds, because that's kind of the big line right there. They'll go 30 seconds, and now do a minute. Okay, we'll give this guy a whole half inning here. So there's a pipeline you got to get into fresh out of college, or work your way into some sort of very beginning level. Luckily I knew people who were sharing offices with the Vallejo Admirals in their very first year on Amador in GVRD's building. Like that's where they are, just to know where they were. And then I could walk in and say, here's my resume, here's my demo. And then they hired me almost immediately because they're like, oh yeah, you sound really good. We'd love to have you call the games. There's no money in it though. You will be an intern.
This is the best part, right?
Age. Yeah,
it's all opportunity.
So I was willing to hit the restart button to feel like I was 21 all over again, and make that climb. And then I networked my way, Pete. I want to make that one big because people feel like, oh, you got to put on a suit and go to the winter meetings. You got to learn to play golf and be in these worlds with these people. Network your way. Network with who you know. So, and with people you connect with. When I'm at Cal Maritime, we're playing a school called Menlo down in Atherton. And the other SID over there, we're emailing, here's our roster, here's our files. All right, here's the thing afterwards. And next thing I know, he and I meet. I see the guy in a Menlo shirt at a conference in DC for sports information directors. And I introduce myself. Oh, you're Brian. Oh, you're Tim. Oh, okay, awesome. And we hang out almost that entire week, go to ESPN parties and stuff together. And he's who hires me at St. Mary's when the opportunity comes later. My former intern at Cal Maritime, Chris Zavaglia, is now the assistant GM with the Stockton Ports. So it's not. This is almost like when you get old and your kid takes care of you. That's almost what this is right now. This is Chris, my former intern assistant. Wanting to bring me in now that he has some say and knowing what I can do. So that's networking your way and getting in any way, shape, or form. Having some getting into that pipeline are kind of the two biggest things with this industry.
There's a guy down here by me. He is one of the marketing people for the Anaheim Ducks. And that's another thing. It's like you have these jobs flower into the things like, oh, I don't get to be play-by-play, but I do get to be the sports information director. And then it's like, oh, by the way, you get to be the assistant GM at Complex, or whatever it is, right? And all of a sudden, you're nowhere near play-by-play, but you are in that world and you know all these people. And so they do, like Justin connects to you probably one relationship away. You guys are going to the same conferences because when you do marketing for the Ducks, you've also worked for and then go down the list as he graduates up, right?
Yeah, exactly. That is definitely a pattern. And when I was teaching some of my interns, some of these kids, it's like, okay, I'm going to teach you the whole job. Maybe someday you want to do just this part or that part, the broadcasting part, maybe just the media relations part. I'll teach you the whole thing because I had to do the whole thing. And it makes them much more well-rounded and able to get the gigs like you're talking about.
Yeah. I'm curious about this, man, because first off, I love Cal State Maritime. It is one of the hidden gems in the entire nation. It really is a remarkable, remarkable school. So shout out to those folks out there. But when you're there, sports information director / there is not a lot of respect heaped upon you in that job. You've got to be very humble because really in your field, and I hate to say this, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but you barely exist, right? And so it's like, who are you? You're like, no, I swear I belong here. I've got a badge and everything. Because it's just not you're NAIA, but for you, it's like, this is my shot. I got to do great at this job. And so even if there's a whole lot of invisibility and disrespect and everything else heaped upon you by whoever is involved in that, that's part of the job, right? Is learning how to deal with that and coming from somewhere.
Yeah, I've been on both ends of it because with the Vallejo Admirals, like when you met me, I was the new guy, it's just a broadcaster and was overseeing social media and the website. And then as the years went on, I gained titles and responsibility. I ended up the league's information director and somewhat by default the assistant commissioner because of that. It was just commissioner's office was the commissioner, me. It's okay, all right, so it's us. And so then I get to make some personnel decisions. I hire a manager. I'm signing a few players, and then we win the whole thing. And that was very validating. Like, oh, I do know what this is supposed to look like. And so I was the man there. I was eventually in those last few years with the Admirals of Vallejo, I was the man, and people recognized me in public in Vallejo and stuff. And then I go to Cal Maritime, and it's a bit of adjustment. You're new there, but I was at least already their contract broadcaster before that. So they knew me as that. They had seen me and heard me. And I interject myself to kind of reduce the anonymity into like I would do a lot of player interviews, player profile pieces, and people love that stuff. So there's my face there. The big adjustment of what you're talking about, Pete, I think happened at my last job at St. Mary's, where there was a bigger chain. There were so many layers that the Mike Matoso, the VP of athletics, he's got my old boss, the deputy director for external affairs below him to handle all of us. Right. And then, and so there's even one other associate director of athletics for communications above me. That was my guy, Brian, that hired me. So that's where the anonymity hit a little bit, where I felt like the low man on the totem pole. That was an adjustment for me, going up to D1, being the low man on the totem pole instead of the man, compared to my previous stops. That was an adjustment at D1. So I think I'm ready to be, back to the broadcaster focal point, be the man again. Everybody listen to me. So I'm ready.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating thing. So as far as I know, the Admirals haven't played any games since COVID, right? Kind of killed
since 19. Yeah. That league halted operations. A couple of the teams, the Sonoma Stompers, went summer collegiate ball, like some affiliated teams did. They went summer collegiate, and the San Rafael Pacifics went to the Pecos League, which was the bottom tier of indie ball, and they moved a team from Santa Cruz to Vallejo last year, the Seaweed. There's so many names we could have had fun with this one. Like you used to love the Pittsburgh Metal,
Yeah.
The metal. And so they haven't played since then. So it's kind of this time capsule. I don't know if they're maybe thinking they would rebirth into the Pecos League as well. The Pacific Association's pretty much done. I don't think we'll ever see that come back. But the Pecos League's still trying in the area. There's just a lack of it in California, or on the West Coast in general. There's a Pacific Northwest league that didn't last in indie ball. Now there's an affiliated one. That's where High A is now. A lot of High A is up there. There's one a Seattle affiliate up that way. The what are they called? The Sea Dogs or something like that, or some one of those names, And so there's some of those up there. There's not a lot of indie ball on this side. East Coast, Midwest. That's where it is. That's where the concentration of it is. I thought back when we met, man, I figured, okay, I'm going to do a few years in Vallejo. Next thing you know, I'm going to end up in the Midwest or, in the South Atlantic League or something like that. I figured that was my path next, to be honest with you, or end up back in Missouri or back in Springfield, Missouri, doing the Springfield Cardinals. I'm hoping to work up to AA for that. But I've learned as well, it's big to kind of settle in and work a market. People kind of know who I am in this area, at least a little bit. They're like, oh, the guy from that thing, there's some recognition a little bit. And so I'm working this market more than trying to climb those levels. Cause independent baseball, if it's just the Pecos League out here, that's not great. It's very bottom rung. And it's, they do still let the pitchers hit. That's the one thing they got going for it.
Hey, I like that.
They got that going for it still. So, I only did one of those games last year, and I was instantly the best broadcaster in the Pecos League, judging by all the fan feedback I got that day. So, we haven't seen the Admirals come back. I don't know if they will. That might be 2019. Could be it. We'll see if they try to bring it back in the Pecos. Former owner Kevin Riley, he's like one of those superheroes escaping the building as it explodes in the background sort of deal. He sold the team in 19 going into 20 to David Finney, who owns Savage and Cook and a lot of property on Merritt Island. Sold it to them. He had kind of ideas of making a new ballpark in Merritt Island, this whole thing. But I would say COVID definitely put that on the back burner for them. The website's gone. Mixler, where we recorded all our stuff, is gone. All my old broadcasts from that time are gone, which I would only enjoy for nostalgia purposes more than anything. But so we have hours. We have hours together. We got that at least. But that's down on a flash drive. But that's because they always want you to, for a demo, use your newest stuff. So I wouldn't use any of that stuff. But it just be fun to listen to and hear how far I've come. Because I was like you. I started to record demos, just going to games with I had those little micro recorder deals, the old ones with the tape in it. That's how I got going. Those were my original demos.
Right, man. It's that's great. And looking at our careers together, where we are now, the Break It Down show is like well established, 2,000 episodes, all these kinds of things. You're getting jobs from people that that's amazing to be working for the Ports. And so, hat tip to you. And look where we are and what we've done. And oh my God, it's amazing. It's amazing. I wanted to ask, so when you look at the Stockton Ports, you're working for that team. You've got teams that are in the market, but maybe a little bit outside of the edge of it. So where does that stop? And then what's the ranking of these teams? Look, Stockton Ports, great. I'm not saying anything bad about any of these things. I'm asking because I don't know. But if the Quakes called, or if the 66ers, and I'm saying the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes called, or the 66ers called. This is all baseball, right? We're staying in the family. Yeah. Are those A-level jobs?
They're in the California League with us. They're in the California
League. So it's all equal. There's no
those are rivals,
you're working. Working for the Angels or working for the Dodgers in the minors is not better than say working for the A's like you are now.
Yeah, the only difference I would say is there are some teams directly owned by the big club, owned by the parent company versus they're just an affiliate. The Modesto Nuts are owned by the Seattle Mariners.
Gotcha. Okay.
So now that happened recently, so there's a lot of turnover. They're maybe a little unsettled in their front office as well as they ended. But in a year or two, that may end up a really prime job because of the direct ownership. I don't, it's very possible. Facilities could possibly make a difference in that. But when you're in the Cal League together, you're in the Cal League together. Then it's about market differences. I would prefer to be up here in NorCal than say San Bernardino. Personally, just a little bit
family
closer
reasons
to the
stuff, right?
Family reasons, and also a little closer to a major market. I feel like just a little bit so compared to San Bernardino to LA. Rancho, well, that's a little different. You're knocking on the door right there with the Dodgers. Because here's an example: the A's, they wouldn't call on somebody from Las Vegas from their AAA system to fill in for the big club. They were calling on my friend, who I'm now replacing, Alex Jensen, because he was right here. He did A's cast before we did their pregame. So when, Vince Cotroneo or, Korak and some of the older folks were like, okay, I'm not doing this road trip. They're calling on Alex Jensen to fill in, not somebody from Vegas. The A's weren't calling, or the Giants didn't call on the AAA broadcaster, who's Zach Beiruti now, former Stockton Ports announcer, or Johnny Doskow before, who's is on the big club with the A's now. They were going to San Jose for Joe Rizzo. And so there's this immediate marketness. It's kind of nice about that to put in for potential market fill-ins, I would say, is the difference for me until you start climbing levels, high A, double A, triple A.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you talking about this too, because, and again, it gets out of curiosity, because it is a whole hidden empire of things that happen. Yeah. The reverse of what you're talking about with say, San Bernardino is not that far from LA, right? But it might be far enough for the Angels that they don't go there. Maybe they go to one of their other minor league teams. But if you're in Rancho Cucamonga and you're their play-by-play guy, sometime in the next week, you're going to be calling a game that Walker Buehler starts.
Yes,
he's doing his read. Right? Yeah. And so that goes into the tape. Wow,
Yeah. Same for the Ports. My friend Brian, who hired me at St. Mary's, he filled in a couple times for Alex as well last year. And Lou Trevino, or not last year, I guess it was 2 years ago, Trevino, the closer, he had his rehab there, got blown up. Got blown up in like an innings or the inning or two. I'm looking forward to my first rehab assignment sometime this year too. I don't know who the A's could send down that would, be worthwhile of feeling like a big moment, but hey, it's a big league of rehab, and that's what matters. Yeah. That's another one I'm having to work on is making sure I sort of filter, think about what I say about the big club now. Let's go with that. I think you lost you there, Pete.
Yeah, the big club.
There you are.
Especially when it's like I'll say this, so you don't have to. Like the A's are having a lot of struggles. It's hard to move a team. It's hard to break up with the community after 50 years. And it's easy to have every step be viewed as a mistake, right? And so you've got to be honest. You got to have integrity, but also you got to be a good employee, And so, like, how do you balance that, right? It's easy to beat up on the A's. It is easy to do it, right? You don't have to do it, but there's a lot to complain about, and
it's a fine line. It's a fine line. I try to listen to even how some of the actual big league broadcasters handle it. Even when I would listen to, I'm from St. Louis, when I'd still listen to the Cardinals, I would, hear how they would maybe still criticize a move or, a front office decision or something, but keep it in a proper context. I've imitated that in game before. I'll do the thing where you ask a question. Make it seem like you're not saying anything about it, but you ask a question about it. Well, interesting to see him make this to make this pinch hitter right here, or make this move right now. I guess he's thinking this. Detractors might say this. That's been my move. I would say is present both sides. Here it is. Here's where the questions are. Here's what the manager's thinking. Oh, taking him out after 70 pitches right now. Some may question that, but last inning he finally gave up a run, and 3 of those 5 balls were hard hit. So I think that's how I'm dancing this line, is to just present both sides. Well, fans are angry about this with the big club, but they're thinking this on the other side. They're running a business and have to do this on the other end. I think that's kind of how I'm trying to go about it right now.
And then some of your job is to tee up the the color guy, right? And so like the A's just sent down Ruiz the other day. And then, let's say I'm the color guy. I'd be like, that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. He had a couple of good games where he had some good outcomes, but I know the A's are looking at him to have better at bats. The quality of bats has gone down, so they want to get him more at bats. So they're going to send him to triple. So I'm just doing the color thing, and I'm making all this up on the fly. But the A's fans are upset. They're like, look how cheap they are. And it's like, maybe there is a design of this. Maybe some of this just is baseball. And fans are fans. They're fanatics for a reason. And so they cannot take any bad news, and they all want to be the GM. But if they were the GM, they'd be terrible at it because they'd be like, knee jerk.
The knee-jerk reaction is hard. Yeah, that's one where, as a commentator, as a broadcaster, I have to reserve judgment on knowing who's available that day. Who are they trying to save for a potential doubleheader? Who's
right?
It's hard to not know that picture. But that's one thing I try to educate fans on. I'm like, okay, we're analyzing this one moment in the 7th inning of 162 games. Right. Manage the rest of it. Think about your job. How busy you are at your job. Oh, I forgot to do that one thing, or I actually should have double checked this first. Amongst your 40-hour work week all year long. It's the same sort of deal that I try to relate to fans. Like, okay, we're talking about this one moment. Now, if those moments start to add up, they happen repeatedly in a game through a season, to go, okay, well, then maybe that criticism is fair. So that's definitely. I went through a phase. We've talked about this where I almost, when you see how the sausage is made on the inside, I kind of killed the fan in me for a little while and was the extreme in the other direction. I was coarse and cold and then I worked on finding the balance again, taking what I've learned about the industry, about how injuries affect guys, about making all these decisions, for a whole season, in a whole game, much less that one that we can see, that we can point out. Try to find that balance, and I'm trying to help other fans, see things that way as well, to reduce the fanaticism, I guess, a notch. But God bless them. They're going to do what they do.
Yeah. I mean, how hardy of a fan are you with the Cardinals? Like, can you take the crazy that the Cardinals deliver? I mean, right now, like, the Cardinals have been a wonderful franchise over the last, like, the entirety of your life. They've been a pretty enjoyable experience, but all franchises have to have their fallow time, and have to hey, we're stuck in these bad all these things. How hardy are you as a fan? How can you take it if the Cardinals throw up a 100 loss season back to back, or would you lose your mind?
It's a struggle, and a lot of the Post-Dispatch writers and other fans kind of saw this coming a little bit. They see the deterioration a little. It started in player development. It's like, okay, well, Randy Arozarena sure looks better elsewhere than he does here. So does Adolis Garcia. So does Patrick Wisdom. So does Zach Gallen. Wait a minute, what is going on here right now? The player development, there was a time when they were ahead of the curve. They've fallen behind it a little bit. They've lacked investment in that area. One of the big strikes for me as a fan, when they fired Mike Schilt. And we've sort of been working this way with management, like questioning their decisions a little. Some you kind of understand. Okay, well, what are you going to do? Okay, you threw your money at this guy. Some of them I try to bring my business side of it and be understanding. Others, in my business mind, still I'm all, no, what were they thinking with that one? And so that was a bad one with me. When they fired Schilt, I'm like, they're going to imitate all the worst habits of the Tampa Bay Rays without having their player development and scouting and their development system. It's like, if you better have one if you're going to try to do some of these other things. And sure as can be, that first year with Ali Marmol managing, and he might turn into a good manager. He's super young, right? I'm going to say they, I don't know where this was coming from. You trade a couple of guys, traded Johan Oviedo to Pittsburgh, a division rival, to get Jose Quintana. Quintana's rolling, 5 1/3, 75 pitches, a shutout, and they take him out to go to the bullpen. And I love me some Jordan Hicks. They go to him, but it can be volatile when he was a reliever. Then Ryan Helsley hurts his hand in the last game of the season, second last game of the season, and they try to get 2 innings out of him. I'm like, there it was. Everything I was just worried about, and my criticism feels valid now that they're going to do this. 5 and the third time through the order, we better take him out now, regardless of how he looks. That's one of the things when I make my debut at the Port, full-time debut. I've already done a dozen or so Ports games filling in. when I make this debut, fourth to the sixth inning is a good time to work in the bits. I got a whole little set of notes on my phone just called bits. And you saw one recently that you liked where I talked about somebody told Lloyd Mosby I was Bob Fitzgerald's kid for some reason. And so that was one of the bits I had on my list. I'm sure I'll do that one for the Ports at some point. But one of the bits is introducing myself. Okay, what's this guy? I'm going to give my bona fides, my Admirals history, my St. Mary's history. Then I'm going to say, well, is he old school or new school? Since there's this perpetual culture war, it seems like in baseball. My answer is yes. I can't wait for these two worlds. I can't wait for these two worlds to meld together a little better because I love me some advanced stats. So first stuff I go to, well, what's his batting average on balls in play? Is this sustainable? What's the FIP? Is this sustainable? What's the walk rate? What's going on with? Okay, well, is he hitting the ball hard? I know he's only in 2-4. Oh yeah, his exit velocity is really good. All right. Oh, it's bad. Okay, these will start to land. I love the new stats. I don't always love the interpretation or implementation of them. And I don't love the old schoolers' resistance to them. Like if baseball players, former players embrace these stats, and then they'd have all the GM jobs again. It wouldn't be shoved out for computer analysts and Ivy League guys. They need to embrace it and use it. And I'm glad that's just now starting to happen. I'm seeing these clinics and workshops and conferences for people who work in baseball to learn analytics, former players and stuff. I'm really excited for that day. I can't wait for that day, man. Then we can have it. But there'll be a new culture war then. It's just there. Emma Bocculari of Sports Illustrated did an article, the many times baseball has died. And people from the 40s, people from the 40s complained about baseball in the 60s and 70s, and people in the 60s and 70s complained about baseball in the 80s and 90s. It'll always kind of be this thing that happens, I think.
Yeah, it's true, man. You know me, I love baseball. I look at it. I love the numbers, but I don't worship the numbers, right? And so I'll start with
it's not the end all be all, yeah.
Right, and I'll look at like Baseball Reference WAR, and I'll go, okay, that's an indicator. And then you look 2 layers in, and you're like, you back out, But I'm going to say some blasphemous things here. Sorry, everybody. When you look at like the 67 Cardinals, I'm going to hit you right in your heart. Red Schoendienst, he should have pulled Bob Gibson. He shouldn't have let him go that third time through to Northcliffe.
Sure.
Because, if you do that, even if the guy is not the best guy, or you should have prepped that guy to be that guy earlier, whoever the reliever is going to be, but you got lefty on lefty matchups, right? And so he misses this call. The Cardinals lose, and it's like, well, Bob Gibson would never want to come out. You're the manager. You go out there and you Bob, you got us all this way. Let us bring it home. Come on, swat him on the ass, send him out. He can be mad as hell because I guarantee you right now, if he could switch, you'd be like, you know what? Yeah, it would have been a good call. And so all of these things happen, and we lose track of. There is the eye test, but there also is the number test. And if you have a guy that's been wearing you out, and if the next 3 hits are you getting worn out, and that's the World Series, well, that's Grady Little sticking with Pedro Martinez.
Yeah.
He gets fired for that shit,
Yeah. There's again, it goes back to that balance. That's an old school being too old school. You know what I'm saying? Versus third time through, 75 pitches. Okay, time to go. Like there's a line to find. There's times when a guy at 100 pitches, you know what? He can go up to 115 the way he's looking right now. There's sometimes a guy at 82 pitches are all right. I think I don't think he's got anything more for the rest of the 6th. You can't go by just that. It's got to be a combo. I'm waiting for this combo. I'm waiting for 3 nights in August and Moneyball to come together. So this is where I am.
That's when you look at roster size too, and the amount of pitchers it takes to run a major league roster, right? That means that impacts the minors too. It's 30 to 40 pitchers to run a major league roster. And so this is one of the growths of the game. Like there are so many more people available and so many more like decisions to make. And so we want, Snell to stay in the game, but you also have this guy you brought in just to be that 5th inning guy to pick up those 2 outs that you need because Snell is at 100 pitches. Man, oh man, a great 100 pitches. But there is that balance between, let him have one more batter. But then you're like, I got to get him out of there because he is at 115. I don't want to see Tim Lincecum throw 140 pitches,
That's bad for you.
It's like, come on. So there is that balance. The other thing I wanted to bring up with you, and I know again this is going to bleed down to the minors, is the competition off the field. And I'm talking administrators, not baseball players. It is severe. I promise right now the Dodgers are going to work on the 70th player in their roster. And I know the roster is 40 people tall, but that's literally what they do. They have to look at the entire floor of the franchise. And there are dudes looking at spin rate, looking at numbers that are much finer. And a lot of teams are good at this, but Astros, the Rays, it's not so much now the Red Sox, but back when they had Bill James there, the Dodgers, these teams look at hey, formerly good pitcher, we want you just to throw your slider, and we think that you'll be succcessul. So they acquire that guy for a bag of balls, and you're like, well, goddamn, And so the off the field game, it's amazing how competitive it is. How much does that impact the in booth time for you? We're like, oh my God, they just hired Pete Turner, who's an analyst guy, and holy shit, he is incredible. He's going to make a difference in this whole. Does that leak into the broadcast booth?
Yeah, it's to our level. It does. Put it that way. The trickle down effect comes into our level because the people signing a lot of the recent draft picks that I see in Stockton, like we get. That's one good thing about the minors shrinking down a little bit, and you do get some of the draft picks quicker into A-ball, which is entertaining. It's fun to see, and that the guys who are signing those scouts, they're computer analysts. They weren't players. They were somebody who studied computer science in college, and they're fresh out. They're a computer analyst, and because they can interpret the data, set up the data, execute with the front office once. That's a big one. That's why it's tough for a lot of coaches getting in who maybe have their own philosophy. Okay, you're not hired for your philosophy anymore. You're hired for, can you teach our philosophy to these guys? Right. Will you buy in to what we want you to get them to buy in? So there's trickle down there to that with the coaches. If you're an organizational coach now, the A's have a new, or the Stockton Ports have a new manager this year, and he's been in the organization since 2019. He was a hitting coach in Lansing before this, high A. Now he gets a chance to manage single A. So you are an organizational person now is how you work your way into the system. And that competition you're talking about for the new data, the new analysts, it's led to guys from Driveline, these places that specialize with the Rapsodo machines and senior spin rate and how to shape pitches. You can teach velocity now, which I think is kind of nice. That might be good in that you used to have to try to get a guy who throws hard and teach control. I think it's easier to do it the other way around now. I think we may see walks eventually begin to decline a little bit at the higher levels, and that, okay, well, here's a guy who's a good athlete, hits his spots. We can teach him to throw a little harder. We can turn that 93 into 96. They're after people who can teach that. They're after people who can just remember when it was Moneyball and it was brand new, and finding on base percentage, like that was the new thing to exploit, the market deficiency, if you will. And so that's where that competition is. They're trying to find the new teaching method, the new research method, the new analytic. It's gone beyond seeing those new stats now to now the technology that's used to shape pitches, to know, like what you were just talking about, you were just talking about, like Kevin Gossman comes to the Giants. They're like, well, you should lean on your splitter. You should throw that more than half the time. Suddenly Kevin Gossman's an ace, that sort of stuff happens a lot now. Sonny Gray had it happen to him. I think that was the stop with either the Yankees or the Twins. Are like, well, sweeper, if you want to learn it, we'll teach it. You throw it a lot, it'll probably go pretty good for you. Sure as can be. It works out for him, finishing second in a Cy Young. And so that there's that competition and the analytic competition that trickles down to us, because when they come up from the complex league, that's what they've just had a heavy dose of from the rookie complex league. And the people who are signing players at A-ball are all fluent or even created these scouting formulas.
That whole thing goes on to the player side, and we'll just go back to the A's and Ruiz again. If you aren't capable of making the organizational adjustments, because they see this as a big strategic organization, great, you're off to a hot start. We know where this goes because we are looking at your, and again, I love to say Boros McCracken. We are looking at, what your batting average and balls in play is. And we realize that, like, hey, there's a lot of luck going on here, and you're not doing the things we've taught you. I'm not saying this is actually what happens, but this does happen.
I've had the same theory. I've had that same theory, though. Yep.
Right. And look, there's a lot of guys that are the 9th or 10th guy on the offensive roster. And they're like, hey, you are not executing good at bats. In our organization, we make the pitcher pay for pitches. And that's, you're not doing the things we've shown you to do. So guess what? You're going to have to either ride the bench or you're going to have to go down a level and work on that daily and improve. Right. And that is part of that competition, that it's stacked and so tight. Like there's this is the thing I want you to comment when you finish on that, but also the difference between good and gone. It's like this now, like a 1-2-5 whip. You're probably not going to be in the league long.
You're right on the border. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that used to be quality pitching,
Yeah. That's the good gone line. It is thin line between good and gone, the love and hate. It's, and what have you done for me lately? That factors in. You got to be going right now. But you're right with the, the organizational edicts. You're no longer, well, this is how I play. This is what I do. This is why you signed me. We signed your tools, and you're going to add these skills to those tools. One in defense of Asturi Ruiz, his on-base percentage was higher than the team on-base percentage, but that's okay. We'll just let that. I get that they want a specific leadoff man, and I will respect the fact that they're like, no, he's going to be back up here. Like we traded this part of the Murphy trade to Atlanta. Like he'll be back up here. We just don't want him to be a platoon guy or a bench guy. We don't want Christian Pache again. We're trying to do, trying to have him be a more polished guy up here. Maybe you question, okay, so you gotta scoop up Phil Nevin's kid. All right. Yeah. Okay. But as the waiver, the waiver from Baltimore. Okay. All right. That's interesting. But that's a whole other episode of nepotism in baseball, and even in my world, especially the broadcasting side. So it's a thin line if you're not producing. I think teams try to, where they do cut some slack. Like, okay, well, you've had a shoulder issue for a minute now. You're coming back from thoracic outlet surgery. We're going to give you a year. We're going to go by more here versus what your ERA looks like right now. Okay, you're back up to 93. You get up to 95 by next spring, and we'll keep you. If you're not, well, then we are releasing you. Like, it's just that's one thing I've learned is just how cold of a world it can be, and I had to adapt to that, and I almost had to teach it to other folks. Be like, no, then we have to cut him. Yeah. Like that's just absolutely. You wish them the best, and you give them pointers on maybe how they can get back in. You could say, well, I know this team's maybe looking for a couple of guys. Why don't you call them? Like, you're helpful. You bring that personal side of things in it still, but you do have to be cold and calculating when it comes to the bottom line and wins and losses.
Yeah. There are so many interesting things to talk about with baseball. I think it's a neat thing. One of the things I've been thinking about, there's two eras of baseball that I think are interesting, and that we've gotten a little bit trapped up in myths and haven't really looked at the thing. So we'll talk about the color barrier that Jackie Robinson breaks, and how if you played before then, oh well, there weren't black players around, and that's a big thing. And obviously, any kind of racism in the game is wrong. However, it is a line in a decades and 100+ year history of lines, right? I mean, to stay alive as a kid in 1895, the year baby was born, 1 in 4 chance of dying. If you grew up in Montana, you know how many players from Montana played in 1910? 0.
Exactly.
It's so hard to anybody to get in the game. Like they'll do like the time machine always works where, like, if you brought Babe Ruth up to face Aroldis Chapman, no way. Like, we'll take Aroldis Chapman and put him back in 1895. He doesn't leave Jamaica. Forget like, he wouldn't be allowed to play. Let's just say he would. To get in the game, there are only so many jobs, and they carried 9 pitchers. Like, they're like, this is
back then. Yeah, exactly.
So we lose track of that. And then the same thing goes for the steroid area. Like, we blame Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens, but it was also 4 expansion teams all of the ballparks got tighter. Only the A's had more foul ground than anybody else. And so all these changed. The ball changed, the strike zone changed, all of the access to video, and then all of that 10-year run up to players working out, legally working out. All of that impacted the game. Yeah.
Yeah, we get caught on like the quick fix in our society. Well, is there a pill? Is there a pill I can take for this? And so we kind of think the other way. We're instantly suspect. Oh man, Adolis Garcia looks pretty big. Yep, steroids. That's it. That's what it's going to be. Yeah, we sort of just, that's the only way. The ball is a big one on the juiced ball era for it, Pete. I'm glad you brought that out because the ball is not the same. I remember Whitey Herzog talking about he would bounce two. He had old one and the new one back then. He would compare it, and one was he would super ball it up higher. It's like, okay, that, you know, I feel like it was an easy out for maybe some of the higher ups of Major League Baseball to be, it was the steroids. We weren't doing anything to try to get people to watch again after our strike. That was that's definitely what it was. So expansion, smaller ballparks, the hitting technology was just starting to develop then. The workout regime aspect of it. You're absolutely right. That one's big. Think about the dead ball era. Like you go through all these different eras, like, you know, and I want to make a point that you talked about where the Aroldis Chapman Babe Ruth time machine, so much has to happen to get to Aroldis Chapman. Like you don't, it just doesn't work that way. You can't, like, and people do it with, Wilt Chamberlain, watching old Wilt Chamberlain clips. Oh, he'd get destroyed by Giannis today. Well, Giannis doesn't exist without Shaq, David Robinson, Patrick Ewing, Wilt, all in between, Bill Russell before that, you know, like, you don't get to, LeBron doesn't exist. His style of play doesn't exist without Michael Jordan. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's not there, or without Magic Johnson. You don't get to there without that evolution in between. And, you know, I think about that one because people talk about, there was a debate, Cardinal fans recently. I don't know, man. I think Rogers Hornsby was actually better than Stan Musial. I'm like, okay, well, let's do one, pre-integration. All right, it's a factor. Is it everything? Nothing matters before that? No, but it's a factor. Yeah. Like it's real. And then, okay, well, Stan played there 22 years too. So let's keep that in mind as for doing that debate. So there's that one, the dead ball era. We go through that. We go through, let's see, we've had dead ball era. We had color line barrier finally changing. You get into, the AstroTurfed, super stolen base, everybody's on greenies and cocaine era. Like, you know, you got that one, Vince Coleman and Ricky Henderson running around all over the place. So there's when that, you know, that was the shape of the game. So the eras are a big one that I try to keep in mind to fans too. Like I try to be educational, entertaining, and descriptive. That's kind of the three things. Like just want to let fans know, hey, well, at one point this happened in baseball. It was completely different. You know, there's the strike zone was different. My tough part I have in watching, and I say this will be something I'll say in the opener with the Ports. I'm going to say, you know what I struggle with most with modern baseball? The incessant whining about modern baseball. Like the game goes through these changes. It is what it is. Like we're here now. It'll evolve again. Contact starting to come back around. Pitchers going back to the quality start. Remember when the quality start was a new fandangled thing instead of wins? Mm-hmm. We kind of got away from that. Quality start seems old school a little bit now. And then now it's starting to come around a little. People are appreciating the contact because that's what keeps winning the World Series. Like I'm watching a game the other day, Dodgers, Cardinals, Ryan Helsley in the game. Okay, he makes one bad pitch, 95. I've never seen him throw 95 before. Fastball, Mookie Betts, of course. Okay, clobbers it. Solo home run. We're still up 2. No big deal. Freddie Freeman comes up, 2 strikes, just pokes a slider for a seeing eye single between second and short. They had him shaded that way even. He gets it between Donovan and Mason Wynn. Then it's Muncy. Muncy pokes a slider nowhere near the strike zone, pokes it into a dead man, Bermuda Triangle.
He was totally fooled on that pitch, too. He was so fooled.
Through. That's coming back around. That's who wins. Okay, you got a slug for sure, because that's who's winning too. The Braves, the Giants year they won their division. those are the teams. It's the people who are in the top 5 of home run percentage that make the top, that win their league, that win the pennant. Like, it's just what keeps happening. But who actually win the World Series, who get there with the power, are the people, the teams who are hitting for average still too. The teams who aren't walking people. Like, it's coming back around. I understand we wanted to find new ways, the competition that goes on off the field. Okay, it really looks like if you got velocity, that's the difference. And that's true. Don't get me wrong. It is harder to hit velocity. There are people, Chris Bassett's of the world, who can still throw 92-ish three, since 93 is the new 90, and who are successful with that. There are less of them. He had a gripe recently. He's like, well, I don't think those guys are getting a shot to even show that they can be effective at the velocity that like I am. So there's a balance to be found there. There's, you can, okay, this guy's 97. Is it effective? Like, is he Armando Benitez? Is it straight right down the middle and guys are hammering it? What's going on here? It's part of that balance. I'm glad I've seen the beginning of the analytics age. It can be frustrating, to get through the resistance of it, the overuse of it. I'm glad I'm in baseball now, as maybe we're starting to find the balance between the two, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
the new stats aren't going anywhere, gang. Like, you better get.
They are not. They are not. Well, and they're too impactful. Like, we know these things. So I'm going to get sacrilegious here on you first. And I'm picking this because I know it'll be more fun. So people who love Keith Hernandez, and it's like, okay, great. He's a great first baseman for sure. But when you field bunts, well, you are taking an out that's offered, and maybe you make it a tiny little bit better by getting the runner at third, maybe. But that is such a small thing. And by the way, people don't bunt anymore because they realize we don't want to give these outs up. And then the other thing they say about players like Keith Hernandez, and I'm picking on Keith right now, is like, oh, he scoops and saves a lot of errors. The easiest thing to do on the field is stand at first and catch the ball it's thrown to you. If you can catch it, you're supposed to catch it. Like, that's just your job. And there are so many plays, say like turning a double play, that requires so much more dexterity. I'm not saying that Keith wasn't a great fielder, he was, but catching the ball that's thrown to you, even if it bounces, like, yeah, that's called fielding a ball, but it's coming slower than it would off the bat, right? And so we know now what that looks like in terms of value, right? Keith Hernandez is great, but we fall in love with that, what we don't understand about the game, and we fall in love with that exciting moment, that charging. I remember seeing him field balls like as it hits the ground, like he just would scream in there, and he's like, what is he doing? It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like, hand it to the catcher, tag that guy out, kind of thing. Yeah. But we also know better that the first baseman, that person has a specific job. And to Keith's detriment, he just wasn't a guy that could hit a lot of home runs, not in his era, not in his ballparks. But we do know what good fielding looks like now, or at least more of what it looks like now, as opposed to flashy. And I'm sorry, first base is just hard to, it's like, I'm the least fat of the fat girls on defense, kind of thing.
I saw, if I hadn't seen Paul Goldschmidt change an infield defense, I might agree with you there. But when he came over to the Cardinals, suddenly a team that was last in the NL went up to first because of what he could scoop up over there, compared to Matt Carpenter trying to play first, compared to some of the other guys that were rolling over there. Matt Adams. I saw him clean that up. I think about my childhood of Keith Hernandez doing that, or Anthony Rizzo in his Cubs days.
Sure.
Coming in and crashing on bunts. It is big to get the lead runner. I do like that. I've seen the first baseman clean up things with the throws coming from the infield, make a difference that way. I guess it goes back to, it's not the end all be all, like we talked about before. Yeah. I've seen it make a difference. It's kind of like how I really like zone ratings for defense. I really like that one. Defensive runs saved, I'm not necessarily there yet, because I feel like how bad your team is around you affects that one. I've seen that one I do like zone rating a lot. I do like the expected play made thing. Defense, we've come a long way from fielding percentage. Oh man, have we come a long way. Still not perfect, but boy, do we get a much better picture with zone rating for me. Run saved, I haven't warmed up to that one yet. Defensive war, but boy, zone rating, that one I click right to that one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one that allows us. Yeah.
Just real quickly, there's one dead ball era guy I want to throw out for anybody watching out there. My favorite dead ball era guy is Haas Radbourne, Charles Haas
Yeah.
Radbourne, Charles Old Haas Radbourne. That's my man right there. That's the guy that was, let's see, he threw 466 innings, going 33-19 with a 2.11 ERA in 1882. That's my guy right there. It was, this is a guy that that's just a different era. Like you can't. That's comparing the eras. Now we know. Oh, wait a minute. Throwing 230 more innings this season is actually bad for you. Throwing 130 some pitches, 140 pitches is actually bad for you. He leads the league in 1884. Throwing 678 and 2/3 innings. He started 73 games that year, with a 1.38 ERA, 73 complete games. Like, we're not doing that anymore. But at the same time, you don't necessarily have to have that quick hook for the guy pushing 92 pitches now, that sort of thing. Balance, man. Balance beat. That's our theme today. Timmy Fitz talks balance.
Yeah. And I don't want to keep you too long. I know we started a little bit late because of my crazy computer, but do you got time for a couple more?
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about, we love to rate the greatest of all time at some position. And really doesn't matter. Like as long as you're above, we've talked about this, as long as you're above that greatness bar, you're great, And I like to find like the last player who won't get in the Hall of Fame, like someone like Johnny Damon. There's no big move to put him in. And man, oh man, he's incredible. And had he had any more luck, he easily could have had 3,000 hits because he was on his way. But nobody's like, man, boy, what a great player. They just like, now he was really good for a really long time, right? And so you have these debates where you have that. I like the thought of someone like Jeter and someone like I like this one. This is a favorite of mine. I do believe that Adrian Beltre is the greatest third baseman of all time. And it's not that Mike Schmidt doesn't have a higher peak and didn't hit the ball harder per swing. I'm not saying that, but I love this. Okay, so if you make their timelines the same, when Mike Schmidt is prepping freshman year of college for his winter term finals, the other guy, Beltre, third base at the Dodgers.
Yeah.
Like, that's ridiculous to be that young. It doesn't take Mike hardly any time at all to make the major leagues, right? But by the time he does, Beltre's 1 year away from being a free agent. It's crazy, right? And so those games stack up. That wonderful glove stacks up. And so when you look at how many outs he gets over Mike Schmidt and how many assists and how many, I look at defense in most of the field. It's putouts. Can you field the ball? Can you throw the ball? And if you can get double plays and that's your job, double play, okay, great. And if you are at the very top of all 23,000 players ever to do that, boy, it is hard to say that isn't more valuable than because I think Mike Schmidt plays 450 or so games less than Beltre, right? And at some point, durability of being there and still being great, right? Still, you can't be shitty. But if you do that, like Omar Vizquel is not greater than Derek Jeter because he played more games. There's not enough of a gap there, and Vizquel is clearly a lower level player. But I think there's something to durability and availability because Jeter plays 90% of all Yankees games at shortstop during his career. Yeah. He is the shortstop Iron Man. He plays more games than Cal, right? You can call Cal the Iron Man. That's fine. But
sure.
There is greatness because if you're not there, the guy behind you is somebody who's frankly not very good, right? Yeah. And so that drop-off costs the team. So that's kind of how I look at some of these things. But how do you look at greatness? How do you sort these things out?
One that gets me when they're doing Hall of Fame balloting and that sort of stuff, it's like, well, it wasn't as good as this person. Okay, like so we can never dip below Schmidt, we can never dip below Babe Ruth. Like we can't. Right. There's not a different that we can all consider a certain amount of whether it's counting numbers or the eye test or whatever it may be. That one bugs me because for a long time there weren't a lot of third basemen getting in. Like that's one of the fewest spots in the Hall of Fame is third baseman until Scott Rowland and Beltre recently got through. It had been a while. It had been a long time. Because think about third baseman. They're like, people think, oh, well, they're a better fielding first baseman. Like, actually, they're a little bit more of a better hitting shortstop. That's third base, in my opinion. Yeah. And so think about guys who maybe started off real well there and then they finish over at first base, or they're DH in their last few years. Like that's a tough spot longevity wise. Like you're talking about. I think about Scott Rowland. How many times he dove out on that shoulder before, eventually it started to wear out on him a little while, and all the throws he made from way over there in the hole. And just how good he was, but the shoulder injuries, wore him out. And it tells you why some guys may seek mother's little helper to stay out there. There's part of me that's like, I kind of wish somebody would have given Andrew Jones some HGH. It'd been nice. So to give it, let Andrew Bennett, prescribe it, if you will. It'll go full legalization. If you went under the knife, you get this for 3 weeks, 3 months, or whatever. And that's, I'm sure it'll never come around. But theoretically, I'm like, boy, it'd be nice to see that guy out there still. Whatever it takes to, whatever we could be prescribed, at least legally, for that would be lovely. Measuring that greatness, I don't like when it's like, well, it wasn't as this guy, so. That's it. They can never be. I think the Baseball References, the Hall of Fame rating thing has helped out a lot. People may think, I think that might have been a Bill James creation, in fact, too, or the Jaws comparison, how many times you were a league leader, what's your overall times you finish in the top 10 of something.
Yeah, the Hall of Fame monitor. That's Bill James.
The Hall of Fame monitor. That's it. Thank you. Yes. And that has helped a ton, because you at least have something there to kind of go by. Because I'd have put Sheffield in, to be honest with you. I don't know if that's a popular opinion or not, but I'd have put Gary Sheffield in. I thought he was worth it. Maybe he's in the Hall of Very Good to some people, but boy, he is, for quite a while, he was a top 10 hitter for a long time. He's somebody I'd have put in. I try to. It's tough. We talked about the eras. I think about the dead ballers who were in. I think about maybe guys who were hepped up on greenies or doctoring the ball before it was quite as sharply kept track of. Or, like we talked about the balls effect on those 90s guys. There was Barry Bonds. We're talking about what, his last 4 years that it seems like he was amplified, perhaps. The other 16 before that, whatever, 17 before that. It's like, okay, that was a Hall of Famer in and of by itself. So I guess they're worried about, the tainting of the game. I feel like as the votership for the Hall of Fame changes to a younger generation, we may see some of those guys get in, some of the veterans committee, some of those players' peers. We may see some of those guys get in. Measuring that greatness definitely involves factoring in the eras, like we talked about, and the eye test, and the league that they were in. They don't have to be better than Babe Ruth to get in. Sometimes it seems, who can we exclude versus who can we bring in? I understand wanting to bring in the elite, and that's important. So you factor in who is elite of their era, and thus that helps shape things for me, along with that Hall of Fame monitor. Those are two huge assets we have now that I hope voters are using.
I'm glad you brought Gary Sheffield up. I think he's a Hall of Famer. And I'm going to go back to this Beltre thing. Sheffield barely plays in the minors. I think it's like 2 seasons. And it's not all complete, right? He graduates in 86, 87, 88. He's there, right?
Yeah.
He's still like 200 days older than Beltre. Like that's how young these guys are. And so Beltre's 19.
Beltre retired at like 35, 36. And you're like, boy,
that seems amazing. It's amazing how young these guys are. And I remember Sheffield, where it was Bonds was definitely better. And this is before anybody had anything to do with any kind of steroids with Bonds. And it was Sheffield. Those guys would not swing at a ball, and they destroyed balls in the zone. Was Bonds better at it? Yes. But was anybody better at that than Sheffield besides? No. Like Bonds was Bonds stood up and pushed that entire 93 Giants lineup forward. Like he was always imminent. Even when he batted, you're like, fuck, Bonds is only 8 batters away. Sheffield was right there with him, So I definitely agree on that. I don't want to keep you anymore, but listen, first, I love it. By the way, Sheffield plays in Stockton during the minors. I don't know if you know that. He played in Stockton.
Yes.
I think it's great, man, where you're at, what you're doing. I hope that you have the Boog Sciambi problem. I know Boog a little bit. He's like, yes. Like every gig, he's like, I don't get to slow down because I'm the guy they call. And the second I say no, they stopped calling. So yes. And so I hope you have that problem because that means you're fantastically successful and you're calling volleyball and you're calling basketball and you're calling curling and everything. And I would love to see that. I'd love to see you calling the Olympics because I just think the world of you. I think the world of your passion and how great you are at calling everything. So from Pete to you, thank you so much. I'm so excited for your success, man.
Right back at you, Pete. I'm loving where the Break It Down show has gone and how worldly it's become, and it's pretty awesome. And I thank you for well wishes and being there with me. And boy, in the early days back in Vallejo.
Yeah, just real quick because everybody's got to know when Tim got his job working with the Admirals, it kind of it overrode our show on certain nights, and so we would come over and call games. And one time the owner was a little drunk and a little bit bored and he wanted us to spice it up, and I'll shut up and let Tim tell the rest of that story.
He was a new owner. We went through a lot of ownerships in those first couple of years. So it's just somebody from the town with a lot of money, wanted to help out, keep the thing going in town that people come to and enjoy. And so he comes in and he thinks we're public address. First of all, we're on the radio. And so he comes in, hey, you gotta liven it up a little. You gotta tell some jokes out there. Make it funny. And I'm just like, oh sure, yeah. We're definitely doing that over here right now. And he's like, but he thought we were public address, so he goes in and fires the public address announcer
mid-game.
Mid-game. He thought we were doing it. Once he realized who it was, he goes and fires our guy Bruce. And so then it fell down to us. We're like taking turns trying to do public address through part of this game. And I remember John, he's all, Pete, we've been ordered to liven it up a little. So you crack open a Budweiser right there on the microphone. That was at the time one of the most weirdest, felt like unprofessional nights I'd ever been around. But you just learn the whims of the owners, the whims of the folks who write the check, and you try to find a balance of what they're after. So to this day, I've got my bits. We had funny stuff we did on that episode, those games, and we would bring up, this guy is from Amarillo, Texas, coming up to the plate. Oh, Amarillo, boy, I was there one time, and you and John would do those stories, feeding off of that. I thought it's what everybody wants really in a broadcast now. It's why I do these bits. It's why I go off into like talk format in the middle of the game where there can be a little lull. But boy, what a wild night. And but it forged our friendship. I'll tell you that. We were bonded for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah. One of my favorite play-by-play guys is Pat Hughes because he always had time to say things, even if it was 2 words. So one time Randy Wolf was facing like Jeff Hawk or somebody, and he's like, animal fight. Right back into the call. He just like, wow, so great, man. He just dashed that bit of color in there. And then Ronnie Santa would come in and start talking about his toupees. And it was just, so good. All right, well, listen, I'm going to roll these credits. Hang on. I'll say goodbye to you when I come back. Okay. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank